from prison for political crimes in 1924. Over the second half of the 1920s, Gandhi continued to pursue India Dominion status or face a new campaign of non-cooperation with complete independence for the country as its goal. After his support for World War I with Indian combat troops, and the failure of Khilafat movement in preserving the rule of Caliph in Turkey, followed by a collapse in Muslim support for his leadership, some such as Subhas Chandra Bose and Bhagat Singh questioned his values and nonviolent approach. While many Hindu leaders championed a demand for immediate independence, Gandhi revised his own call to a one-year wait, instead of 2. The British did not respond favorably to Gandhi's proposal. British political leaders such as Lord Birkenhead and Winston Churchill announced opposition to the appeasers of Gandhi in their discussions with European diplomats who sympathized with Indian demands. On December 31, 1929, the flag of India was unfurled in Lahore. Gandhi led Congress in a celebration on January 26, 1930 of India's Independence Day in Lahore. This day was commemorated by almost every other Indian organization. Gandhi then launched a new Satyagraha against the tax on salt in March 1930. Gandhi sent an ultimatum in the form of a polite letter to Lord Irwin, the Viceroy of India, on March 2. Gandhi condemned British rule in the letter, describing it as a curse that has impoverished the dumb millions by a system of progressive exploitation and by a ruinously expensive military and civil administration. It has reduced us politically to serfdom. Gandhi also mentioned in the head without him see. A horrified American journalist, Webb Miller, described the British response thus. In complete silence the Gandhi men drew up and halted 100 yards from the stockade. A picked column advanced from the crowd, waded the ditches and approached the barbed wire stockade. At a word of command, scores of native policemen rushed upon the advancing marchers and rained blows on their heads with their steel-shot lathis, long bamboo sticks. Not one of the marchers even raised an arm to fend off blows. They went down like 9 pins. From where I stood I heard the sickening whack of the clubs on unprotected skulls. Those struck down fell sprawling, unconscious or writhing with fractured skulls or broken shoulders. This went on for hours until some 300 or more protesters had been beaten, many seriously injured and 2 killed. At no time did they offer any resistance. This campaign was one of his most successful at upsetting British hold on India. Britain responded by imprisoning over 60,000 people. Congress estimates, however, put the figure at 90,000. Among them was one of Gandhi's lieutenants, Jawaharlal Nehru. According to Sarma, Gandhi recruited women to participate in the salt tax campaigns and the boycott of foreign products, which gave many women a new self-confidence and dignity in the mainstream of Indian public life. However, other scholars such as Marilyn French state that Gandhi barred women from joining his civil disobedience movement because he feared he would be accused of using women as a political shield. When women insisted on joining the movement and participating in public demonstrations, Gandhi asked the volunteers to get permissions of their guardians, and only those women who can arrange childcare should join him. Regardless of Gandhi's apprehensions and views, Indian women joined the Salt March by the thousands to defy the British salt taxes and monopoly on salt mining. After Gandhi's arrest, the women marched and picketed shops on their own, accepting violence and verbal abuse from British authorities for the cause in the manner Gandhi inspired. Gandhi as folk hero. Indian workers on strike in support of Gandhi in 1930. Indian Congress in the 1920s appealed to Andhra Pradesh peasants by creating Telugu language plays that combined Indian mythology and legends, linked them to Gandhi's ideas, and portrayed Gandhi as a messiah, a reincarnation of ancient and medieval Indian nationalist leaders and saints. The plays built support among peasants steeped in traditional Hindu culture, according to Murali, and this effort made Gandhi a folk hero in Telugu-speaking villages, a sacred messiah-like figure. According to Dennis Dalton, it was the ideas that were responsible for his wide following. Gandhi criticized Western civilization as one driven by brute force and immorality, contrasting it with his categorization of Indian civilization as one driven by soul force and morality. Gandhi captured the imagination of the people of his heritage with his ideas about winning hate with love. These ideas are evidenced in his pamphlets from the 1890s, in South Africa, where too he was popular among the Indian indentured workers. After he returned to India, people flocked to him because he reflected their values. Gandhi also campaigned hard, going from one rural corner of the Indian subcontinent to another. He used terminology and phrases such as Ramarajya from Ramayana, Prahlada as a paradigmatic icon, and such cultural symbols as another facet of Swaraj and Satyagraha. These ideas sounded strange outside India during his lifetime, but they readily and deeply resonated with the culture and historic values of his people. Negotiations. The government, represented by Lord Irwin, decided to negotiate with Gandhi. The Gandhi-Irwin Pact was signed in March 1931. The British government agreed to free all political prisoners, in return for the suspension of the civil disobedience movement. According to the pact, Gandhi was invited to attend the Roundtable Conference in London for discussions and as the sole representative of the Indian National Congress. The conference was a disappointment to Gandhi and the nationalists. Gandhi expected to discuss India's independence, while the British side focused on the Indian princes and Indian minorities rather than on a transfer of power. Lord Irwin's successor, Lord Willingdon, took a hard line against India as an independent nation, began a new campaign of controlling and subduing the nationalist movement. Gandhi was again arrested, and the government tried and failed to negate his influence by completely isolating him from his followers. In Britain, Winston Churchill, a prominent conservative politician who was then out of office but later became its prime minister, became a vigorous and articulate critic of Gandhi and opponent of his long-term plans. Churchill often ridiculed Gandhi, saying in a widely reported 1931 speech, "It is alarming and also nauseating to see Mr. Gandhi, a seditious Middle Temple lawyer, now posing as a fakir of a type well known in the East, striding half-naked up the steps of the viceregal palace, to parley on equal terms with the representative of the King Emperor." Churchill's bitterness against Gandhi grew in the 1930s. He called Gandhi as the one who was seditious in aim, whose evil genius and multiform menace was attacking the British Empire. Churchill called him a dictator, a Hindu Mussolini, fomenting a race war, trying to replace the Raj with Brahmin cronies, playing on the ignorance of Indian masses, all for selfish gain. Churchill attempted to isolate Gandhi, and his criticism of Gandhi was widely covered by European and American press. It gained Churchill's sympathetic support, but it also increased support for Gandhi among Europeans. The developments heightened Churchill's anxiety that the British themselves would give up out of pacifism and misplaced conscience. Roundtable Conferences. Gandhi and his personal assistant Mahadev Desai at Birla House, 1939. During the discussions between Gandhi and the British government over 1931-32 at the Roundtable Conferences, Gandhi, now aged about 62, sought constitutional reforms as a preparation to the end of colonial British rule, and begin the self-rule by Indians. The British side sought reforms that would keep Indian subcontinent as a colony. The British negotiators proposed constitutional reforms on a British Dominion model that established separate electorates based on religious and social divisions. The British questioned the Congress Party and Gandhi's authority to speak for all of India. They invited Indian religious leaders, such as Muslims and Sikhs, to press their demands along religious lines, as well as B.R. Ambedkar as the representative leader of the untouchables. Gandhi vehemently opposed a constitution that enshrined rights or representations based on communal divisions, because he feared that it would not bring people together but divide them, perpetuate their status and divert the attention from India's struggle to end the colonial rule. The Second Roundtable Conference was the only time he left India between 1914 and his death in 1948. He declined the government's offer of accommodation in an expensive West End hotel, preferring to stay in the East End, to live among working-class people, as he did in India. He based himself in a small cell bedroom at Kingsley Hall for the 3-month duration of his stay and was enthusiastically received by East Enders. During this time he renewed his links with the British vegetarian movement. An admiring East End crowd gathers to witness the arrival of Mahatma Gandhi, 1931. After Gandhi returned from the Second Roundtable Conference, he started a new Satyagraha. He was arrested and imprisoned at the Yerwada jail, Pune. While he was in prison, the British government enacted a new law that granted untouchables a separate electorate. It came to be known as the Communal Award. In protest, Gandhi started a fast unto death, while he was held in prison. The resulting public outcry forced the government, in consultations with Ambedkar, to replace the Communal Award with a compromise Pune Pact. Congress politics. In 1934 Gandhi resigned from Congress party membership. He did not disagree with the party's position but felt that if he resigned, his popularity with Indians would cease to stifle the party's membership, which actually varied, including communists, socialists, trade unionists, students, religious conservatives, and those with pro-business convictions, and that these various voices would get a chance to make themselves heard. Gandhi also wanted to avoid being a target for Raj propaganda by leading a party that had temporarily accepted political accommodation with the Raj. Gandhi returned to active politics again in 1936, with the Nehru presidency and the Lucknow session of the Congress. Although Gandhi wanted a total focus on the task of winning independence and not speculation about India's future, he did not restrain the Congress from adopting socialism as its goal. Gandhi had a clash with Subhas Chandra Bose, who had been elected president in 1938, and who had previously expressed a lack of faith in nonviolence as a means of protest. Despite Gandhi's opposition, Bose won a second term as Congress president, against Gandhi's nominee, Dr. Pattabhi Sitaramaiah, but left the Congress when the All India leaders resigned en masse in protest of his abandonment of the principles introduced by Gandhi. Gandhi declared that Sitaramaia's defeat was his defeat. World War II and Quit India movement. Gandhi opposed providing any help to the British war effort and he campaigned against any Indian participation in the World War II. Gandhi's campaign did not enjoy the support of Indian masses and many Indian leaders such as Sardar Patel and Rajendra Prasad. His campaign was a failure. Over 2.5 million Indians ignored Gandhi, volunteered and joined the British military to fight on various fronts of the Allied forces. Gandhi's opposition to the Indian participation in the World War II was motivated by his belief that India could not be party to a war ostensibly being fought for democratic freedom while that freedom was denied to India itself. He also condemned Nazism and fascism, a view which won endorsement of other Indian leaders. As the war progressed, Gandhi intensified his demand for independence, calling for the British to quit India in a 1942 speech in Mumbai. This was Gandhi's and the Congress Party's most definitive revolt aimed at securing the British exit from India. The British government responded quickly to the Quit India speech, and within hours after Gandhi's speech arrested Gandhi and all the members of the Congress Working Committee. His countrymen retaliated the arrests by damaging or burning down hundreds of government-owned railway stations, police stations, and cutting down telegraph wires. In 1942, Gandhi, now nearing age 73, urged his people to completely stop cooperating with the imperial government. In this effort, he urged that they neither kill nor injure British people, but be willing to suffer and die if violence is initiated by the British officials. He clarified that the movement would not be stopped because of any individual acts of violence, saying that the ordered anarchy of the present system of administration was worse than real anarchy. He urged Indians to karo ya maro, do or die, in the cause of their rights and freedoms. Gandhi's arrest lasted 2 years, as he was held in the Aga Khan Palace in Pune. During this period, his longtime secretary Mahadev Desai died of a heart attack, his wife Kasturba died after 18 months' imprisonment on February 22, 1944, and Gandhi suffered a severe malaria attack. While in jail, he agreed to an interview with Stuart Gelder, a British journalist. Gelder then composed and released an interview summary, cabled it to the mainstream press, that announced sudden concessions Gandhi was willing to make, comments that shocked his countrymen, the Congress workers and even Gandhi. The latter two claimed that it distorted what Gandhi actually said on a range of topics and falsely repudiated the Quit India movement. Gandhi was released before the end of the war on May 6, 1944 because of his failing health and necessary surgery. The Raj did not want him to die in prison and enrage the nation. He came out of detention to an altered political scene. The Muslim League, for example, which a few years earlier had appeared Marxist in Gandhi called for the British to quit India. However, the Muslim League demanded divide and quit India. Gandhi suggested an agreement which required the Congress and the Muslim League to cooperate and attain independence under a provisional government. Thereafter, the question of partition could be resolved by a plebiscite in the districts with a Muslim majority. Jinnah rejected Gandhi's proposal and called for Direct Action Day, on August 16, 1946, to press Muslims to publicly gather in cities and support his proposal for the partition of the Indian subcontinent into a Muslim state and non-Muslim state. Hussain Shahid Surawardi, the Muslim League Chief Minister of Bengal, now Bangladesh and West Bengal, gave Calcutta's police special holiday to celebrate the Direct Action Day. The Direct Action Day triggered a mass murder of Calcutta Hindus and the torching of their property, and holidaying police were missing to contain or stop the conflict. The British government did not order its army to move in to contain the violence. The violence on Direct Action Day led to retaliatory violence against Muslims across India. Thousands of Hindus and Muslims were murdered, and tens of thousands were injured in the cycle of violence in the days that followed. Gandhi visited the most riot-prone areas to appeal a stop to the massacres. Archibald Wavell, the Viceroy and Governor-General of British India for 3 years through February 1947, had worked with Gandhi and Jinnah to find a common ground, before and after accepting Indian independence in principle. Wavell condemned Gandhi's character and motives as well as his ideas. Wavell accused Gandhi of harboring the single-minded idea to overthrow British rule and influence and to establish a Hindu Raj, and called Gandhi a malignant, malevolent, exceedingly shrewd politician. Wavell feared a civil war on the Indian subcontinent, and doubted Gandhi would be able to stop it. The British reluctantly agreed to grant independence to the people of the Indian subcontinent, but accepted Jinnah's proposal of partitioning the land into Pakistan and India. Gandhi was involved in the final negotiations, but Stanley Wolpert states the plan to carve up British India was never approved of or accepted by Gandhi. The partition was controversial and violently disputed. More than 500,000 were killed in religious riots as 10 million to 12 million non-Muslims, Hindus and Sikhs mostly, migrated from Pakistan into India, and Muslims migrated from India into Pakistan, across the newly created borders of India, West Pakistan and East Pakistan. Gandhi spent the Day of Independence not celebrating the end of the British rule but appealing for peace among his countrymen by fasting and spinning in Calcutta on August 15, 1947. The partition had gripped the Indian subcontinent with religious violence and the streets were filled with corpses. Some writers credit Gandhi's fasting and protests for stopping the religious riots and communal violence.
Yeah.